The vast majority of men who start lifting do so in order to stop being skinny. There's a very simple reason for that. Lifting weights and exercising is the best way to pack on muscle and buff up your frame with quality mass. That being said, it's not all there is to it to getting jacked. And focusing too much on this simplistic mindset of just lift weights and you'll get big has led many a fellow skeleton to spin their wheels and eventually give up on their training journey, convinced that they are destined to be skinny for the rest of their life. I'm here to tell you today that this is a lie, using the case of Jack Hanma as an example. If you don't know who Jack is, I advise you go check out the muscle manga episode I made about him, as today will mostly be focused on his training and the lessons we can learn from it. You will see that going from skinny to buff is always possible, but if and only if certain parameters are met. Jack is the classic shonen manga character, going from underdog to absolute unit within the span of a few pages. Although his transformation is greatly exaggerated, it still remains a valid visual representation of the physical changes skinny and tall men can expect their bodies to go through as they put on muscle. Issue is, Jack went about it all wrong, which prompts me to ask this question. Would his transformation be possible naturally if the method was corrected and his mistakes addressed? And before someone asks, no, drugs will of course not number in those parameters. While Jack Hanma's steroid intake will of course be discussed in this video, as it's actually an important part of the reason why he finally got big after years of wasting his time, we'll mostly focus on the things that we need to avoid by looking at his approach. This topic will be especially relevant to lanky young men, although anyone who is skinny can still benefit from it. I chose this Baki character as a guinea pig because his stats and training history are going to mirror a lot of people's experience. Standing at 6'4", he is the perfect representation of the tall, skinny guy that cannot seem to put on muscle, no matter what they do. You will see that each and every one of his mistakes reflect an ongoing problem that might be plaguing your muscle building quest, and I'm going to detail and explain every single one of them so as to help you craft better practices that will help you leave your skinny body behind. When he first appears, Jack can be seen pummeling away at a sandbag. That's already a mistake. For those who wish to be better fighters, there might be no way around using a bag to develop their striking, but for the skinny individual trying to pack on muscles, any cardiovascular focused activity needs to be avoided. Yes, you heard me right, I'm telling you to stop doing cardio. If your goal is truly to prioritize muscle gains, you need to let your body employ all of the resources it has to rebuild your body and make it bigger over time. If you constantly obsess over being shredded or maintaining a super high amount of cardio in your training, you're basically sabotaging your gains by burning the calories that should have been allocated to muscle fiber damage repairs. You might also be wasting time and energy that should be used to lift weights. Skinny young men need to focus on resistance training, especially compound exercises. These are the movements that will put the most muscle on your frame over time. The issue that stems directly from this backbeating madness is the fact that Jack trains too hard. It might sound counterintuitive for those not versed in bodybuilding, but going above and beyond what your body can recover from is not only useless, it actually kills any possibility of you making gains. Muscle building is a multi-step process. First, you damage the fibers, then you give them enough time and food to allow them to rebuild themselves bigger and stronger. Over time, this creates muscular hypertrophy, and your body grows. But if you fail to fulfill that recovery part of the plan, the entire thing goes up in flames. A lot of skinny young men will try to overwork their way out of their current situation, not realizing that their zealous attitude is what is keeping them small and weak in the first place. The goal should be to train enough to stimulate growth and progression, with a strong focus on recovery. Don't worry about not doing as much volume as you could have or leaving some gains on the table. The penny in your pocket is worth more than the quarter rolling down the road. Remember, your goal is not to become really good at working out. Your goal is to get big. So don't turn your training sessions into marathons and focus on exercises performed with a high degree of intensity, but always with perfect form and total control of the weights. Once you've done what you had to do, go home and recuperate. This is where Jack fails. By spending 12 hours beating on a sandbag, he's showing that he doesn't understand how muscle building works. You can do curls for 5 years non-stop with no breaks, and your biceps will still never grow, because they never got time to rest. Muscles don't grow as you train them, they grow afterwards as a side effect of supercompensation. Another lesson to take from this situation is that you should listen to your body. Obsessed by his goals, Jack has taught himself to completely ignore pain. This is not a good thing. because pain is a precious indication that you're either doing something your body doesn't like or that you're pushing the training past any relevant recovery limits. Of course, I'm not telling you to stop lifting the second you feel pain, but you need to be able to differentiate between muscular pain or pumps, which are just normal byproducts of training heavy, and the type of pain that indicates a potential injury or overtraining. Overtraining as a skinny young man is a real threat. It's not necessarily that it will leave you sick or hurt, but rather that it can have you enter an endless cycle of catabolism, which is the exact opposite of muscle building. Essentially, your muscular endurance is going to dictate how much work you can do before you run out of gas and start spinning your wheels uselessly. That value is called your baseline, and it is what is going to dictate your maximum recoverable volume in most cases. Past that, you are not only wasting your time, you're also robbing the muscle from precious time it could have used to rebuild itself. And just like Jack, you most likely have low muscular endurance. This complete mismatch between Jack's training and what his body can handle is exemplified by the fact that the scientists providing him with his drugs tell him he doesn't have to change his training while he's on cycle. This shows that it was way too harsh in the first place, and not something that would have ever produced results had he stayed natural. You want to do the exact opposite of what Jack is doing here. Instead of just pumping out as many reps as possible, you want to set a rep range for the exercise and work inside of it. This will give you a context to push and track progression, but will also arrange for an easy way to track volume and intensity over time, to make sure that you always do enough work to grow without going overboard. And understand that if you get to your prescribed number of repetitions, but can still somehow continue to bang them out, it means that you mismanaged the weight selection in the first place, and didn't achieve muscular failure. Don't get stuck in the mindset of thinking that doing more reps is always better. You need to be able to lift to failure. Remember, you don't go home when you can't move anymore. You go home when the training is over and you've stimulated the muscles. What Jack is doing here is called lifting for the pump, which is a terrible idea for any tall, lanky man to follow if they want to get jacked. On top of that, he is curling with bad form, which is another pitfall to avoid. You, as a slim giant, need to focus on strength progression over time, which means you will stay between 2 and 15 reps, 3 to 9 being an appropriate strike range for the core of your training. You also need to focus on performing all of your movements with perfect technique, which goes back to another aspect of pain that Jack willfully ignores. On average, your trunk, legs and arms are going to be longer than most other men. This means that you will be faced with specific challenges that the vast majority of lifters have no idea about. A lot of navigating those problems will come down to your ability to tune in with your body and understand what works and what doesn't, based on pain signals. Do not push through painful movements simply for the sake of doing what everyone else does. You cannot copy the training techniques of people who are 5 inches shorter than you. It will only lead you to Snap City and a lifetime of skinniness and resentment. All of these mistakes are directly caused by Jack's methods, who believes that more training is always better. The issue is that is completely untrue, especially if your body cannot recover from it. The only effective lifting session is the one that gets absorbed in the form of muscular damage and transformed into mass increase. It is imperative for tall and skinny men to grasp that concept. The training session that allows you to progress and that can be done on a frequent basis is better than the one that leaves you out of commission for a full week, regardless of how much gains you think you're getting from it. In short, you don't want to be the world's frailest man doing the world's hardest training. Your goal should be to build a body that will eventually be able to handle monstrously long and strenuous training sessions, which also means that it should never be something you do as you start. The length and difficulty of the regimen needs to match the body's demands, and not the other way around. Trust me, if you're at or above 6 feet 2, you will eventually turn into a monster, but that's if and only if you manage to be patient. And patience is the exact thing that Jack is missing. Some could try to argue that him being skinny after all his efforts proves that he has bad genetics for muscle building, but I don't think that's what the author tried to convey with his story. Rather, the point is that his idea that training hard must result in muscle gains was simplistic and bound to fail, because he was ignoring the most important aspect of hypertrophy for skinny/tall guys: recovery. If you fail to give your body enough calories and sleep, then all the training in the world is useless, because you will fail to put on mass. This inability to wait eventually leads to his steroid use, which greatly boosts his hormonal profile and suddenly allows him to make gains off his insane training sessions. In a sense, they've provided him with the ability to recover from the workload that was making his body crumble beforehand. Of course, we can't ignore the fact that testosterone and other exogenous hormones promote muscle growth, regardless of physical activity. But what I mostly want to focus on here is how they suddenly helped Jack's physical traits match his spiritual drive. In a sense, it helped him erase the mistakes that were preventing him from building muscle and basically turn the wrong into a right. As a natural lifter, you won't have access to that chemical crutch. This means that you're going to have to build a body that will eventually match your ambitions, which can only be done with diligent and patient work, year after year. Jack's scenario, while inspiring in its own right, can only really exist within the pages of a manga. In reality, ignoring the scientific method, which really means ignoring the limits of your body, will only lead to a complete absence of gains. His recklessness also points to another character flaw that is lethal for the muscular development of skinny and tall individuals. He harbors a complete disregard for his own body and health. This might sound cool in theory to act like a badass warrior who don't feel no pain, but in practice this only means that your stay in the game will be short. For someone who has access to shonen grade steroids and whose only goal is to defeat the strongest creature on earth, that's fine, but for you it's entirely idiotic. The taller you are, the skinnier you are when you start, the more space you have to fill out with muscles. This is going to take you years, if not decades. Anything that endangers your ability to lift during that time period needs to be avoided, and that includes reckless training practices. Note that I'm not saying here that Jack Hanma's transformation is realistic or doable for natural lifters, regardless of the time invested. What he's done in 1 week can be entirely unachievable for you, even in 10 years. Good news is, you shouldn't be comparing yourself to others in the first place, as it will make you lose sight of the only important party in this muscle building game: you. If you manage to stay focused, I can tell you without the shadow of a doubt that the version of you that will be built from years of hard work will be entirely unrecognizable from the skinny self that you used to call a body. What I want you to take to heart from Jack's flash metamorphosis is that the time it took does not matter. Whether it is 1 week or 25 years, time will go by regardless, might as well spend it training. If you obsess over arbitrary deadlines, you will find yourself resenting the absence of gains you feel you should have been achieved in that time span, which ultimately will lead you to stop training, confirming the self-defeating prophecy you drafted when you started to obsess over getting quick results and leaving you skinny forever. If you can manage to do that, then a transformation on par with Jack's is within your reach. You too can turn those skinny arms that you were always so ashamed of into massive branches knotted with muscles. Never again will you have to wear long sleeve shirts to hide your bony elbows and non-existent guns. Now you'll be able to show off those buys and tries with pride. That frame that was always your greatest enemy will turn out to be your best ally once it's packed full with muscles. Goodbye small pectorals and ribs poking out. You'll get so thick that you'll have a tough time closing your jacket over your massive chest. You'll never have to hear another chicken legs joke ever again, simply because you won't be able to hear them over the noise of your gigantic quads stomping the floor with each step. Your entire body, which used to feel naked and vulnerable, will be magnified by the collection of muscles you'll be able to showcase, empowering you mentally in the process. If these words hit you when you're still in your skinny stage, they might sound like nothing but a dream. But that's fine, because this is what it is: a fantasy. An image in your spirit that you wish was turned into a reality. Well, I got news for you. It depends entirely on action, and if whether or not you're willing to get it done. Jack, in his buffed up state, is an ideal representation of what we should all be aiming for. The fact that he achieved it through steroids is irrelevant to our case as natural lifters, and the idea that this might be an unrealistic standard to strive for is baseless. Ideals were never meant to be realistic. If you manage to get into that flow, your craving for a stronger and more resilient body will only strengthen with time. As long as you stay patient, this is entirely fine and even necessary for your progression. If anything, you should start worrying if that fire starts to die off. You will also find that focusing on longevity will keep you in the right state of mind. Try to keep your bigorexia in check by reminding yourself that the goal of building muscles is to feel better about yourself in the first place, and that includes the ability to keep your body going for a very long time. There's no point in getting jacked if it only lasts 2 weeks. Sustainability and frequency are key. Unlike Jack, who thinks that he doesn't need tomorrow as long as he can become stronger today, you need to approach the present day as one of the many steps that will eventually lead you to building the body that you desire. This means, in a sense, that the notions of today and tomorrow are entirely irrelevant. Just do the best you can every day and do the same again tomorrow, and keep at it until the end of times. Baki perfectly understands that mindset, him who was born with a small body and a narrow frame. Unlike Jack, who simply could not wait many years for the potential hiding within him to be revealed, Baki has put in his best effort every day for the best part of 10 years, never doubting that the work he was doing was going to bear fruits eventually. You need to have the same level of trust towards your training, and brush all doubts aside. There is no mistaking it. If you keep training and eating, you will get big. Repeat that mantra to yourself every day. This is a type of determination that is entirely alien to Jack, who is amazed at the fact that Baki would be able to advance so far with a body so small. I also encourage you to put these considerations aside, as they're doing nothing but weighting you down. Don't obsess over your genetics or what you perceive or not to be your lot in life. Just train. And as you do, make sure you take it all in. The sadness, the pain, the joy, the despair, these are some of the emotions you will have to go through as you advance on your fitness quest. Embrace them all, as they will be your only companions on that train towards Muscleville. And since the track never ends and the travel is endless, you will find that the real experience was never about the end goal. It was always about the journey. Keep in mind also that you are lucky. You're lucky to be born in this world. You're lucky to have access to food. You're lucky to be able to lift weights as a hobby. You're lucky to be tall. You're also lucky to be skinny, because all that it really means is that the growth you will be able to achieve will be that much more spectacular. Make a show of gratitude at every turn of your life. You will find that it will make it much easier to focus on the positives, which in return will allow you to get to work unencumbered by the details. You are not Jack. You will not be taking miraculous drugs or undertake a magical chemical reaction that will make your body purge itself of all the toxins and build muscles out of nowhere. But you will still be able to push the limits of the human body with hard work and hard work alone. You also will never have to train 30 hours a day. Lifting, despite the masochistic image it has developed, is sustainable and safe, and considerably less time consuming than a lot of the modern habits out there. And since it won't be a torture, sticking to it for 10 years won't be a hassle either. Just like him, you will also have to increase the density of your training, but since you will have started with 40-minute long sessions, this will only result in an extra 10 minutes here and there. That evolution of your training will be a fun way to spice things up, while at the same time serving as a good indication that you are progressing, seeing as how your body requires more and more work to grow. Your recklessness, as a skinny or lanky guy, will have to manifest itself into an unrelenting spirit of evolution, one fixated on the idea of getting bigger, regardless of time limits or discomforts. It will never, however, fall outside of the premises of what we know is best for the growth of our body, which is essentially everything that Jack is doing and that was outlined in this video. With that, you have all of the ingredients to perform your own body transformation, and one that will be much more sustainable and satisfying than one that would be achieved through drugs, because it will be your own to claim. Thank you for watching this episode of Anime Workouts, and don't hesitate to check out the playlist if you've enjoyed it. There's a lot to watch with many more to come.